really interested in Ian's thing about going to the Apple store and buying from John Lewis and picking up from Waitrose, because, of course, I think that is just terrible. As far as I'm concerned, you're bound in duty. Loyalty to your country should make you go and post it in the post office. What more can I say? So I've been with Royal Mail for a little over 3 years, and as we all know, a lot of things have happened in Royal Mail during that time. I was actually hired just under 2 years before privatisation, because the privatisation actually took place in October last year, and we entered the FTSE 100 December last year. So we've been a FTSE 100 company for just over a year. I just thought it would be interesting to share with you what has happened in Royal Mail over the time I've been there, because I think it's kind of relevant to us all in terms of what has happened to the role of IT within Royal Mail over that time. When I was hired, IT was viewed as a pretty tedious, expensive, non-performant back-office function that caused trouble, basically, to the business. Now we do all of those things, but they can't do without us. So that's okay, then that's progress, I think we'd call it. But the truth of the matter is that by the time I joined Royal Mail, the government had been very keen and very clear that the direction of travel was privatisation of the business, and the direction to the executive team was make the company ready to be privatised. And there had been a number of structural issues that meant it couldn't and wouldn't happen unless those structural issues were tackled. One was to do with splitting from the post office, because Royal Mail was to be privatised, but the post office was not. I know we all think that it's the same company and it's a single brand. In fact, it's two entities. The second was the pension deficit. The pension deficit was such that no investor in their right mind would invest in a company with that pension deficit. And so it was necessary to find a solution for that. And that needed to be worked through with the British government and also with the EU because of fears of transgressing state aid. And that took a bit of time. The third was the regulatory environment. The regulatory environment in which Royal Mail was operating, candidly, meant that the company would never be able to trade as a PLC. Because, if you've got a regulator, and I'm really sorry, if somebody from Postcom is in the room, I'm not being rude about you personally. It's a fact, however, that if you've got a regulator that just regulates one company, then that company is going to be pretty heavily regulated because they've got nothing else to do. and having worked in the railway as well, I will tell you I've yet to encounter a regulator that says, I know, let's simplify matters. They don't. And so the regulatory environment was hellish. Any time Royal Mail wanted to change any feature of any product, they had to consult with the industry, and they also had to give 6 months' notice. That's the equivalent of asking Tesco's to tell Sainsbury's 6 months before they want to change the price of a pint of milk. It's not going to work. And the last element was part of the regulation was on price. And regulation not just on price of stamps, but also on price of parcels that were part of the regulated product set. And in essence, the pricing regime was such that Royal Mail was delivering parcels below the cost of dealing with them. And you can't make money doing that. And actually, the way I think really brings it to life, Moya Green used to say, or in other words, the British taxpayer is funding Amazon's post because Amazon are big customers of ours. So all of that had to change, and then you're in a world where actually it's now down to the company and it's up to you to make sure that you have a proper strategy and you're able to compete and attract inward investment. And that's where I come in, because the IT function had been underinvested for a very long time, and it was outsourced in 2003 entirely, leaving a retained organisation of about 400 people. All the data centres, all the apps, all everything gone, and 1,800 people. By the time I joined in 2011, the internal organisation was down to 119 people, looking after about 400 applications and an annual budget of about 350 million quid. And, even you might want to be a cheerleader for your function, but it was non-performant. It couldn't. Those poor people could not operate effectively because there were too few of them. And they weren't very happy people. In the employee survey of 2011, the Employee Engagement Index is the measure, IT was the lowest in the company by a country mile. It would be an ambition to try and catch up to the second last person. So people were pretty miserable. But they were massively loyal to the company and to the brand, and so they stuck around. So the first thing I needed to do, when I picked myself up off the floor, was to work out how on earth were we going to do this. We needed to refresh the contract, get a whole new set of outsourced contracts, and in fact, I needed to extend our current contract by a couple of years to give us a chance to work out how we wanted to engage with the market and who we would want to contract with into the future. And that takes time, and it hadn't started when I joined, although the contract was finishing 18 months later. So you do the maths and you'll know that there was no way it could be done in the original time. The infrastructure had not been maintained. In fact, it was in pretty parlous condition. And so there needed to be a remediation program, which winningly, and by God, did this get traction in the company, we called Get Safe. Because there's no way we could transition when we've got hardware that's out of support with operating systems, software that hasn't been in support for a number of years, and sort of best endeavour support for a bunch of applications. You have to do something about that. The third element was actually issuing RFPs and going to market and deciding where we want to go. And most critically, rebuilding from the ground up the IT function. And that meant getting agreement from the board and from the top of the shop as to how many people we were going to hire, how we were going to function as an IT function, the speed at which we would be able to rebuild this. Because, critically, we did not have the luxury of saying to people, why don't you go away for a couple of years while we fix things, and then everything will be grand, because remember, we're on a march towards privatization. So in parallel with all this stuff, we had to find a way and deliver business change and customer capability so that we could try and catch up with some of the features and functions that are routine in other businesses but had not been developed in Royal Mail because there'd been no investment. I'd just like to talk about the recruitment for a moment because I think this is something that might be highly relevant and applicable to many other people. So we were 119, and when I got agreement from the board that we were going to grow a proper function, the target I set for myself, because why would you go for an unambitious target, was that by end of March, starting in September 2012, by end of March 2014, we would have 350 permanent people working in Royal Mail. Or in other words, we would treble the size of the function. Now, that doesn't sound like a hard thing to do if you go to a job fair and get a load of graduates. But given that we've got a very large and complex infrastructure and a lot of contracts with suppliers, we needed top-end people, we needed architects, we needed program and project managers, we needed security experts, we needed big hitters with lots of experience if we were to have any chance of succeeding. And I don't know what your companies are like, but I'll tell you that any big company I've worked in finds it very difficult to move at pace in this kind of stuff. And so the concept of having 16 months to hire that number of people and have any chance of success meant that we had to redesign entirely the way we set about doing it. So we did a whole bunch of different things. we created a recruitment machine, we called it. It comprised some people from my function, a couple of people from HR, and a couple of people from AMS who actually worked with us to help us to get it going. We obviously had to do all the job design and all that boring stuff, but we wanted to get to the market in a different way. We wanted to excite interest in the market because, let's face it, people love Royal Mail, but they don't say it's a sexy, cool brand. They say it's trusted and lovely and all that stuff, but they don't say it's sexy and cool. And so the worry was that we wouldn't be able to get people to come. So because we were on such an exciting journey of changing the business, then actually, if we could get the story out there, we thought that it might excite people. And so we videoed people, some of members of staff, talking about what they were doing and why this was great fun. We even videoed me, so if you find this marvellous, you can go onto YouTube and see me from 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. And we created landing pages on online job websites. We did a huge amount of work with LinkedIn over time. That really built up. We obviously did something on our own website, and we created all sorts of materials so that as we went out to the marketplace, it wasn't just, here's an ad, it was an integrated program of work. Again, the issue we had was needing to be recruiting constantly over a long period of time. We didn't want to become like DFS. You know those leather furniture people. And they always say, and the last day of the sale is Saturday. And you go, who cares? The next one will start Monday. We didn't want it to be like that, so we were very careful to target different communities of people so that sometimes we were looking for security people, so we looked for those communities of people in the various job sites. Sometimes we wanted program and project managers, etc., etc. Where there were people we were interested in getting where they weren't applying to us, then we would contact them via special interest groups in LinkedIn and say, have you ever thought of working in Royal Mail? How did it work? Well, it worked pretty well, actually, because so far, we have had just under 30,000 applications for people to join us. It's a lot of people for just in that way. And it has been it's been really cheap because you're not paying fees all the while. You're using the online medium to get to people. We are now just south of 500 people strong. Actually, we've gone beyond the 350 we said we would need to go to. We had to create a lot of material to make it easy for people to come in. Because if you have, so we've now quadrupled our size, if you've got all these people landing in, you have to be really careful to make sure that you don't alienate your workforce, the loyal people who were there during the thin days, so that they feel part of creating the future. You need to think about the culture you're going to have, because when you have a 3X coming in, then notwithstanding the culture you had when you started, it's going to be different. And so one of the things we put a lot of work into is making sure that we buddy people up and we think and talk about our culture actively, because it's important to get it right. In terms of business delivery, because that's really what it's about, as Ian said, when I joined, there were 23 projects on the go. Imagine in a company the size of Royal Mail, 23 projects. And several of them had been running for several years and really done very little. So there weren't 23. There was a list of 23 things. We now routinely run in excess of 100 projects. It's a rare weekend when we're not implementing much business change. In this calendar year alone, we have implemented 100 business change projects, 100 infrastructure projects, 26 security programs, because they always have to do stuff with security, God knows, and 25 Get Safe projects. And that's in 2.5 years since we started this program. So, I was going to change the tagline of my speech to be, how do you create a favourable brand for your business in the IT marketplace? I believe you can do it so long as you think about it in an integrated fashion, and you don't do things in a scattergun approach. And LinkedIn agrees with us. We asked them to do a study for us of how the Royal Mail employee brand stacked up with some pretty major and sexy other IT employers. And we doubled the engagement index of the next closest player, which I candidly would never have believed 2.5 years ago. Thank you for your attention.